At the very moment they were freed, blacks of that era recognized the burden of freedom and began searching for something to excuse their many shortcomings. And LBJ, in that momentous commencement address, delivered it to them. Now blacks learned that even if they were free, they could still be victims. Shelby Steele, a black American conservative author who grew up during this period, describes this phenomenon in his book, White Guilt. He says, "The greatest black problem in America today is freedom. All underdeveloped, formerly oppressed groups first experience new freedom as a shock and a humiliation, because freedom shows them their underdevelopment and their inability to compete as equals. Freedom seems to confirm all of the ugly stereotypes about the group, especially the charge of inferiority, and yet the group no longer has the excuse of oppression. Without oppression, the group automatically becomes responsible for its inferiority and non-competitiveness. So freedom not only comes as a humiliation, but also as an overwhelming burden of responsibility," he concludes.
African Americans haven't made an iota of progress. Of course this has to be because we're still oppressed. How do you deal with that argument, Shelby?
It's a corruption. And it's a corruption because if you look at the statistical difference from then up to now, who says that's because of racism? Maybe it's because you haven't yet developed the value system to the ideas with which to thrive in freedom. Maybe you don't know what to do with the opportunities that surround you. It's understandable. You were oppressed. And people have not pointed out to you the challenge of freedom. And what do people do with freedom when they don't know how to handle it? They reinvent their oppression, even as it has faded away. They make it up in their mind all over again. Racism is around every corner. There is systemic racism. There's structural racism. There are microaggressions, and there's white privilege. And all of this, this is designed again is the shock of freedom and not knowing. I mean, you look at today's black leadership, they have no clue of how to move ahead. All they can think to do is ask for more from the government. Well, we've asked for the government has given us almost everything. Nowhere in history has the government paid off its people more than America has in the last 60 years. And yet we are, by most socioeconomic measures, farther behind white America than we were in the 50s, when we had none of these social programs and so forth. So it is, freedom it comes with a judgmentalism. It judges you. If you don't know how to thrive in freedom, it means that you are at fault. You are, in the worst word you can use regarding blacks, you are inferior. It's a chilling idea, but it's at the heart. It is the heart of the shock of freedom. Because freedom now is saying you can't use oppression as an excuse anymore. If you're not doing well, it's not because of oppression. For goodness sakes, we've got affirmative action. We've got everything to help you. If you're not doing well now, it's on you.
There is nothing more terrifying than freedom, particularly when it arrives to you suddenly after years of oppression. After years of being told that they were unequal, Black Americans suddenly had to contend with the empirical proof that indeed they were, albeit through no fault of their own. Understandably, due to prior oppression, blacks lagged greatly behind white Americans in all areas of education. Too fearful to rise to the challenge of outworking our opponents, we accepted the poison of the victim narrative that we see today. Rather than dealing with the burden of responsibility, we began accepting handouts, or rather, we began allowing white Americans to create an illusion of progress. There is no greater example of this than the morally contemptible practice of affirmative action.